Welcome to this episode of Shonen Flop, where we talk about manga and Shonen Jump that didn't make it big. I'm David.
I'm Jordan.
Next week, we'll be covering Raw Grad. If you'd like to read along with us, be sure to join the discussion in our Discord and submit your 6-word summary. Find a link to our Discord in our episode description and on our website, shonenflop.com. But this week, we are talking about sex at 120%.
Yeah, like Tagoro.
Yeah, fuck, that should have been the cover. We should have Tagoro in the sex ed room. But we are joined by the wonderful series letter, Sara Linsley. So, Sarah, thank you so much for being on the show. I also want to give a big shout out to friend of the show, Finn K, winner of the Guest We Most Want back on. So thank you so much for putting us in touch with Sarah. And then, Sarah, do you mind telling the audience a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Sara Linsley. I'm a manga letterer and software developer. I've lettered a lot of things. I've lettered Don Da Don.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. I Tell C, which we were just talking about.
Yeah.
I've lettered for Viz Media, Yen Press, Kodansha. Been doing it for like 10 years now. I talk a lot about it on the internet. Yeah, that's me.
Sarah, you should know that I am the resident ITEL-C defender.
Yes. Maybe we'll have you on a revisit of ITEL-C. How's that sound?
Oh, with David, yeah.
Yeah, it was not that great. Anyway, Sarah, I usually ask all of our letters, as Jordan knows, what is your favorite font? My guess, though, is probably the font you made. Is Girl Kisser correct, or is there a font that you didn't create?
Are you asking me to pick a favorite child?
Sophie's choice, David.
All my favorite font.
I have to be honest, in the history of this, I think Finn is the only one who just snap was like, oh yeah, I actually just off the top of my head know what my favorite font is. And Jordan always is like, what an absurd question to ask every time we have a letter. So that was the only time the question didn't cause issues.
I think my favorite font that isn't my font that I love to work with is called Samaritan Tall.
Ooh.
It goes in so well with so many different series. Also, it's really narrow.
Is there any series you've done that uses that font?
Yeah, but I can't remember it off the top of my head.
I'm interested in this Girl Kisser font.
Yeah. So for people who don't know, Girl Kisser is my most recent font. And the way that I make fonts is that I draw them on paper and then I vectorize them and then I turn them into a font. But during that drawing process, I'll take comics from my own library and I'll basically like hand letter the dialogue. And a lot of the comics that I was using for reference while I was working on this font were all like gay comics. And I was like, oh man, I gotta make the name of this font gay.
I thought you were going to say, like, while I was lettering this, I was kissing my wife the whole time.
That's also true.
It was really tough to like look at the paper as I was drawing it.
Fuck it.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't really know how to follow up with that. And then, Sarah, you also said you're a software developer.
Yeah.
What kind of software development do you do?
I work at Viz Media, so manga. I do manga code, yeah.
Not to sound super, but what does that mean, manga coder? Or are you intentionally, I can't get into details of my job, which is fine.
Well, I work on internal tools,
Oh, very
so
cool. Okay.
it's like anything,
What text do you use? You're a text editor.
Oh, man, I wish I knew the font of my text editor. I actually
Imagine
changed
if you used
it.
Girl Kisser for your program.
I did change it to like one of Comicraft's fonts once for a joke, and then I was like, oh, this is awful. I understand why we have to use monospace.
Yeah.
fonts
Yeah.
because-
Is it a VS Code that you use?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your favorite theme? Do you remember off the top of your head? No.
No.
Okay, we need to actually start talking about this series. Let's get into the manga details. We're goofing around. Jordan, take it away, my friend.
So this is sex ed 120% because, we go beyond 100%.
Yeah.
But this is written by Kikiki Tataki, and this person's other works include Ishimi-san's G Life. So, it's like gangsta life. 2021 to 2022, 2 volumes for Bamboo Comics. A manga whose title I relate to very much called I Want to Quit My Part-Time Job. 2022, 1 chapter self-published. How to Ask for Sex for Working People, which I feel like relates to the previous manga title. 2023, 1 volume in Love Chocolate. And How to Avoid Being Unhappy in a High-Rise Apartment. Again, I feel like these all relate to each other. 2024 to, well, still going on, 2+ volumes in Comic Days. And apparently it's about an office lady aiming for a dream of living in a high-rise apartment with a wealthy partner, and comedy ensues. But this series was drawn by somebody named Hotomura, and this person's other works include Saki-chan is the child of a succubus. Interesting. 2019 to 2022, 3 volumes Comic Meteor, and the beautiful shut-in girl living downstairs was a new VTuber at a major agency. These are named like isekai are, where it's just like long as fuck. These are light novel names. That runtime is 2024 to it's still going on. 1+ volumes in Manga Bang Comics. It's written by Sorino Koshi. Apparently, it is about a guy who's working at a dodgy black IT company, which I know about from Zombie 100.
Me too.
And he encounters a cute girl that lives downstairs from his apartment and discovers that she's a new VTuber, applying his IT skills to help her be the best she can be. So basically, the plot summary is the title, as it is with most of manga with these kinds of titles. Anyway, we're not talking about that. We're talking about Sex Ed 120%. It ran from January 14th, 2020 to February 10th, 2021. Apparently, it ran on @Vitamin. That's @sign. It is a webcomic platform owned by Karakawa ASCII Media Works that has its various series released chapters on dates ending in a 3. Okay, that's interesting. @Vitamin is a little something to add to your daily life.
Aww.
Digital comics that cheer you up and heal you, according to themselves.
Aw, I view comics like vitamins, essential for life.
Yeah, sometimes they hurt me, though. I guess if you take the wrong vitamins, you can get hurt, too, so
Okay.
you know what? That's fair.
You just pee them out.
Jordan's like, let's make this episode weirder.
Yeah, well, it's not weird enough, but this series ran for 18 chapters and 3 volumes. Anyway.
Nice. And let's find out what happened in those 18 chapters.
Suji is a gym teacher at an all-girls school, which means that she has to teach sex ed. She has 3 main students: Matsuda, a tomboy who's really into BL; Kashiwa, who's asexual and into animals, but not in that way;
Thank you for specifying, Jordan.
and Moria, who's into women, and yes, in that way. The first lesson is about how to initiate sex, and Suji starts handing out condoms and dental dams. This shocks Nakazawa, the school nurse, who tells her she just can't do that. Suji takes this opportunity to demonstrate how to initiate by asking Nakazawa if she'd like to test out a dental dam with her, which Nakazawa rejects. Popcorn Jordan.
Suji covers topics such as masturbation, menstruation, and a lot of LGBT issues, which is great to see in a manga. You never see that in a manga. You have all these girls who are like, oh, that girl is so cute, you know, like, oh man, she's so pretty, but it's like understood they're not gay. So it's amazing and like really refreshing to see them be like, no, this girl is a lesbian. I appreciate that.
She is a girl who likes girls. It's 2025. Get used to it.
She has a girlfriend and not in like, oh, you know, me and my girlfriend. No, she is her girlfriend. Anyway, the girls, meanwhile, are preparing for the school festival. Kashiwa wants to make a display about animal penises, and I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah. Matsuda and Sumire, who is Moria's girlfriend, drag Moria to a BL event where they meet one of their favorite authors, Yumeko. Yumeko apparently likes to drink with Suji and tells her that, hey, she should probably just admit that she's bi and is in love with Nakazawa. On the next class trip, Suji tells the 3 girls that she's bisexual, and they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. You're constantly hitting on Nakazawa. Popcorn David.
Suji then tells Nakazawa, who she's sharing a room with, that she's bi and in love with her. And Nakazawa is accepting but turns her down, and it's kind of awkward. Yumiko and the girls convince Suji to ask Nakazawa out again, but she says no because if she falls through, then working together would be really weird. In the school festival, the girls have a lot of people leave messages of encouragement, which leads to Nakazawa being like, what the fuck? Okay, let's go out on a date. And they go to the aquarium where they run into Denji and Asa. And actually, this was a backdoor pilot to us talking about Chainsaw Man again.
Oh my god!
In this essay, we're going to discuss who my favorite, speaking of LGBT representation actually in Shonen Jump.
Okay, David, well, looking at the time and the Chainsaw Minute has passed.
Hey, there are lesbians in Chainsaw Man.
There are multiple lesbians in Chainsaw Man.
Yeah. Anyway, Sarah, can you tell us about Suji?
Suji is a sex ed teacher. She's very energetic.
I have to say this every time.
Easier just to have them read it than you explain it to them, as we literally, they had one bullet point left to say.
Sexual harassment.
Yes,
Yeah.
there you go. Love it. Oh, man.
Okay, so yeah, let's talk about Suji a little bit. She is the queen of sex talk.
She's got a very modern and progressive perspective on sex ed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that they made her so young and so hip. Like, whenever I had sex ed in school, it was like by a coach who's like a middle-aged dad, and I can't imagine having...
Not some Zoomer.
Yeah, and I think that was a really interesting choice for the artist to make.
It is frustrating that, like, the person who has to teach it is just, like, the gym teacher. Like, not even, like, the science teacher or, like, anybody who would be actually qualified for it. Like, it's a shame. And, like, I wish that sex ed teachers were as enthusiastic about it as Suji is. Because she is enthusiastic.
Yeah, she is a bit ditzy. I feel everyone in the series, except for Nakazawa, is kind of dumb, but like in a fun way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I guess, well, once we get through characters, let's say, who do you feel is the dumbest character? But anyway, Jordan, do you want to tell us about Matsuda?
Matsuda is really into BL, which, if you're not familiar, listener, is boys love. It's like...
I thought it's basketball life.
Cool. It's gay romance manga, basically. Gay boy romance manga. And she's like a tomboy. Like, when they were talking about trans people, I was really expecting her to come out as like a trans man, just because like how she talks, it seems like she's like envious of boys love, you know?
I did feel like the trans topic, I'm glad it came up, but it did seem like they spent a lot less time than I thought they should have on that topic.
Yeah.
They didn't actually have a trans character, which was like, I mean, I guess they didn't have a gay male character either.
But it was at an all-girls school, so I guess...
Yeah.
Well, actually, they did imply that the vice president...
Yeah, they implied that the vice principal.
Or, yeah, the vice president.
JD Vance.
My point is still 100%.
That is very fair. But no, there was a moment where like the vice principal sees their very gay friendly presentation. He's like, wow, if only this was around when I was a kid, you know? Things might have been different. And the girls are like, wait, what?
Yeah, they all look at him like, oh, gay.
No. It's a shame they didn't invent gay people until 1995. All right, anyway, Kashiawa, she's a cat fan. Need to note, normal cat fan.
Yeah, she's not actually weird about it.
Yeah, I actually thought it was interesting. The offer was more invested in talking about asexuality than trans, which I feel asexuality seems to be much more underplayed in a lot of LGBT discourse. So yeah. I do think it was nice. But yeah, she has a very biological approach, and I kind of wish they had been like a time skip and showed like what happened. She probably would have been like an animal biologist. I actually had a former boss who his PhD study was in mongoose testicles.
Wow.
Wow.
So I guess there is a academic path for her, you know? And that was on my first day. He told me about his PhD in mongoose testicles. But yeah, did you guys have anything else you want to say about her?
The cat fan thing is funny because, like, so Matsuda, the BL fan, thinks that she's talking about a dom-sub relationship.
Yeah.
And then Moria, who's a lesbian, thinks that she's talking about basically a bottom. Apparently, in Japanese gay culture, bottoms are referred to as kitties. I did not know that until this manga.
Yeah, I felt like that, the like shtick with her, and they're all assuming that it is like a dom-sub situation instead of like her actual cat. I feel like that kind of got lost in English a little bit, but I'm so glad that they explained that in the translation notes, I think.
It's interesting in this manga whenever they talk about like a sex topic that doesn't translate well, that like we don't have a direct comparison for, like the obsession with phimosis.
Oh yeah.
Like if you don't know, phimosis is a disorder where the foreskin is so tight that it prevents like an erection. There are all these guys who are scared that they might have it, and there are apparently ads in like public places and porn magazines for cosmetic circumcision, basically. And this manga like addresses it and is like, it's actually a very rare condition that you would need that, and you're fine 90% of the time. But yeah, like I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, it's so wild what different cultures like obsess over about like what you need to change in your body, even though it's completely natural.
Yeah, which they also talk about, which is really nice.
Yeah.
You have to understand, Sarah, this is a rare treat where we actually, I think, can say we enjoyed reading this series. So it's just so rare for us to be like, I really want to get positive about this. But anyway, Sarah, can you tell us a bit about Moria? Moria
is a lesbian.
Moira, the Irish character.
In my defense, yes. But also, there's not a lot of depth to these characters, so things like their sexuality is generally a very large component of their character's identity. Just to point out that I did write their sexuality in every section, but that's kind of the point of this series.
I mean, this is an edutainment series.
Yeah, I'm glad that they included the different characters, to like show different like young women, but it was very one note with all of the characters, but I totally understand why.
Which we'll get into.
So Moria is a lesbian and she's kind of a goof.
Yeah, she may actually be the dumbest one, given that I wrote that note about it. There's not much. Her girlfriend seems pretty cool. She shows up once or twice. I didn't think she was worth noting explicitly as a character.
Yeah, Sumire, I think, who is not as dumb as her, I would say.
You can't have both people be dumb. It's like me and Rachel. Rachel's the smart one.
Yeah, you gotta have at least one brain cell in the relationship.
Yeah.
It's like an orange cat. You got to share the brain cell.
Speaking of brain cells, we have Nakazawa, who's probably the only character that is competent or at least intelligent in this series. She is, I think, the school nurse. Is that right? She's not a teacher. I know I wrote teacher by accident. Suji harasses, but it kind of, I guess, turns out okay in the end. That was, to be honest, a part I kind of didn't like, but that's about it, right? Every character's paper thin because of edutainment, and they don't have time to talk about really the characters because it has to be the framework of the series, which I think is a good segue into why it failed. So let's get into it. Sarah, do you mind telling us what were some things that you didn't like about this series?
I think we covered this before, but I didn't like how there wasn't very much coverage of transgender.
Yeah.
I'm glad that they included, I wrote this down in a note, I'm glad that they included genderqueer people too in the discussion of trans people.
Yeah.
I think that they sometimes get lost in the discussion.
It kind of just felt like a missed opportunity, you know, like more so than like anything else. Because I feel like they did set up Matsuda to be like a potential like trans man. They have her dress very androgynously, and she's obsessed with like BL to an extent where it feels like she's jealous.
One thing I do want to say is, though, in contrast to that, otherwise you wouldn't actually have a heterosexual representation in the series.
There are enough straight people,
I guess, but I do think it's also important to also emphasize that you can have those traits and still view yourself as cisgender and heterosexual, which is still also an important message, not to say like, oh, what about cis rights? I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying that I think it is still good to have a contrast where not every character either had an unusual gender or sexual identity for the sake, because there are going to be cis het women reading this series.
Yeah.
and there are going to be cishet women who like to dress androgynously and who like to dress more masculine, but like that doesn't mean...
Yeah, which I'm saying is great that she does, but still identifies as a cishet. I think that the trans was definitely the biggest topic. I think that they really needed one or two more chapters on. Like they didn't even... I don't know if Stonewall is considered a generally, but like I would have thought that they would have talked about that a little bit because that's probably one of the most famous trans right moments in...
They did.
Did they mention Stonewall explicitly?
They talked about Stonewall.
Oh, did I miss that?
Yeah. I thought that was really interesting because like the way that I've been taught about Stonewall is like the full history of like it was a riot, you know, they were throwing stones at cops, you know, and then in this it was just like a single panel. It's like, oh yeah, that's where, you know, gay rights started. I'm like, I feel like we could have spent a little more time on that.
That's what I mean is they did mention it, but like they probably could have had a chapter on Stonewall as one of the most famous gay rights moments in human history, or LGBT rights, sorry.
I was honestly surprised by how important that was on a worldwide scale, you know, like it wasn't just America that it had like a heavy effect on. It was also clearly influential everywhere, which is like amazing.
I know we can talk about the miscellaneous thoughts. Again, no more criticism. As we talked about, this is edutainment, so every character is paper thin. But then it also spends, I think, honestly, way too much time on the Tsuji and Nakazawa stuff, where the last like 3 chapters of the series are entirely like, oh, here's a fact for 5 pages. Let's get into that dating thing.
Yeah.
And I would be curious if what you guys think. I honestly really did not like that last chapter. It still felt like they were really, really peer pressuring Nakazawa when she already had set her thoughts, and it made me feel very uncomfortable. I know this wasn't intentional. It was like, oh, you know, straight people can be gay. They're just being cowards that they're not trying it. Well, it was kind of the message I was getting, where it was just like, oh, if you pressure a straight person to try and date a gay person, which goes against honestly a lot of the messages. And I really thought that it was much stronger when they're like, well, first of all, not all gay people are into each other. It's like how you're not into all women or all men. And it really tried to make it feel like sexuality was a choice rather than, you know, like, I feel like I'm not quite equipped to use the right vocabulary, so my apology, but I think you guys get what I mean by how that last chapter just didn't sit right with me.
Yeah.
It was very much like, well, just try it.
She's like, okay, everyone in the school is forcing me into this.
Yeah.
Yeah, since this is the only like representation of bisexuality, I found it a little bit offensive. Like, Tsuji spends so much time talking about consent and just say no, you know, but then when it comes to Nakazawa, she can't just take no as an answer. And I think that bisexual people are often painted this way as like sexually promiscuous. And I found it pretty offensive, to be honest.
Well, it's strange, right? Because Tsuji kind of does take no for an answer, and then everyone else is like, you shouldn't take no for an answer.
Yeah.
Like, she gets pressured into not taking no for an answer, which is, it's a really weird thing that happens.
And she even talks about consent rejection. Like, this is an important message to have rejection and handling rejection come up in a sex ed class.
Also, they had the date at the end, and it seems like Nakazawa is still not into Tsuji.
Which is fine.
It's just kind of, it's interesting how they're like, how she's like, yeah, we're on this date, and I'm still sorry, just not really feeling it.
Yeah, that was the only part that really rubbed me the wrong way, and it was extra long chapter. And again, they have this subplot, and again, it's edutainment. We don't really care about it.
Yeah.
Which also shows how good the actual facts were, that I was more interested in learning about the LGBT stuff or the sexuality stuff than that.
Stop with the kissing and the hand holding. Get back to the the educational part.
Again, they could have spent probably one or two on the date chapters talking about trans material that they skipped over or didn't skip that they didn't focus enough on.
Yeah.
I also want to say there is also a shitload of text. I get it's edutainment, but even the non-edutainment parts, I was like, holy shit, this is a lot of fucking text to read through about these characters that do not really have personalities.
Yeah. Also, I feel like the animal penises chapter came out of nowhere.
That was weird. That was super weird.
Like they just spent a chapter talking about like how sugar gliders have 2 penises and 3 vaginas.
Very articulated cat butthole in the last chapter, by the way.
The 3 vaginas just made me think of 7 vaginas. Real ones know that comic.
As a counterpoint, I did like the inclusion of talking about sexuality and gender in animals.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that the penis stuff was kind of weird, but I think that we hear a lot today about like, oh, being gay, being queer isn't natural. This isn't what animals do. Like, they do. Like, nature is so queer.
There's a lot of gay animals. Swans can be gay. That was does anyone remember that viral Reddit post about that?
No.
Someone was like made a list of like reasons my wife has cried, and like swans can be gay was like on that list twice, I think. I also think that the paneling is also very pedestrian. I guess it didn't really have to be, but I was still like, oh, look, it's just different squares and rectangles on every page, you know?
Yeah, I think it's using, I'm not a scholar in Japanese paneling, but I believe it's yonkoma, so like 4 panels. I think it's like very intentional.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So like each page is its own like comic, but it tells a story if you read all of them sequentially.
I missed that then. My apologies. Did you guys have any other things? Because again, we like the series, and I do think some of this is nitpicky, but we still are contractually obligated to criticize the series.
I feel like we kind of said like most of the issues, you know?
Then let's get into what it did well. Jordan, what are some things that you enjoyed about the series?
I mentioned it earlier, but wow, a manga series that like actually talks about like queer culture, you know?
Yeah.
Like queer Japanese culture. You know, like you read all this manga where it really feels like it's still an extremely taboo thing to talk about over there.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's very little mention of it in the manga that we cover. And so it's like you develop this like perception that it's like, I mean, obviously there are gay people in Japan, there's gay people everywhere, but it's like you develop this idea that like there isn't a super prominent gay culture over there. So it's nice to read this. We're like, no, there is. There's like important queer culture in Japan. There is.
Yeah, it's really crazy that gay marriage still isn't legal in Japan. I think Thailand is the only country in Asia where it's been legalized.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was only legalized in the US 10 years ago, which is crazy.
Because Joe Biden fucked up and accidentally said that their platform was that they supported gay marriage. And then it turned out, wait a minute, people want that. Okay, I guess we do that now.
Unironically based.
Unironically based Joe Biden. Rare Joe Biden W.
Yeah. But yeah, and then the series is very educational. I thought I learned a lot. And again, is very progressive with its approach. Like, this is absolutely up to the current standards, I think, of 2025 Western sexuality viewpoints on these topics, which is actually very impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the translator Amanda Haley did a really good job of not only localizing all of these terms, but also like making it feel very modern. I obviously can't read the Japanese, but I think I got to give Amanda big props because she did a really good job translating this.
It was interesting because they also touched on like how there were these, double standards for how male sexuality is addressed with female sexuality. Like where masturbation comes into the conversation, where it's like there is this perception that it's not something that we talk about with women.
I think having an all-girls school was a really great idea because, again, we don't spend enough time on these women's topics, and this forces that to be in the forefront.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, the topics are very interesting, and they're not afraid to discuss them either. They're just like, no, we're talking about cunnilingus now, you know? This is important. We're talking about analingus right now.
They did talk about that, didn't they?
They did.
I also like how this series talks about a very mature topic, but it never feels kind of overly sexual. Which, Jordan, I did get my chibi guess right. You actually never see genitalia portrayed in the series.
Well, you see animal genitalia.
You see a parentheses eye, which I thought was really funny.
Yeah, but like that, I was actually kind of surprised they censor the penises.
Yeah, I mean, it's like one of the sad things about a series like this is that it is marked as 18 plus, which sucks.
Yeah.
Which was ridiculous. This should absolutely have been a 16 plus series.
This is a series that, like, I would recommend being in high schools and stuff.
I recommended this to my friend who is a sex ed teacher.
Yeah, this is a very good resource, you know? Did you notice, like, there was, like, a 2-chapter period where they were recommending websites, like, specific Japanese websites where you can go and submit questions and talk about sex and, like, and ask sex questions in, like, a good, healthy way. I went to those websites, you know? I couldn't read anything on them because they're in Japanese, but, like, they seemed, like, really friendly looking. They even had, like, a guest spot from a YouTuber who's a sex ed teacher.
Yeah, she showed up.
Yeah.
And the Q&A at the end was really cool.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
I wish it had run long enough that these were like actual questions being submitted, but it was still nice.
I loved the questions and answers at the ends of the chapters. Some of them were really funny.
Great way to use the same art every time.
Yeah, I loved how one of the questions was like, my labia is too big. Is that okay? And she was like, your labia is cute. It looks like it can fly.
Yeah, I loved all those like really candid questions.
Yeah.
I think that we've been criticizing how much this series goes into like the paper thin characters and their like weird relationship, but I like that they had those like little snippets of like really good information.
Yeah.
I do think that the sex ed topics came up pretty organically. We read a series called Champagne, which I don't know if you've heard of that series, Sarah.
No.
But it's about champagne, and literally that is the most forced. We have to talk about, we're contractually obligated to talk about champagne every chapter manga, where it's just the most random shit, where they're just like, oh, you're painting your house green. You know what manufactures their champagne in green bottles? Let's talk. And it was like this, I never was like, okay, this makes zero. Well, I mean, they did lampshade it a little bit because they're like, wow, she's really bringing the sex ed, but she was literally doing a skit during a sex ed class where it felt forced, so I feel like you got okay. But I never felt like no one naturally would be talking about the topics this way, which was really great to see. Because again, it felt like it was well researched and well done, and she really felt like she had a very modern and
healthy,
very liberal approach to the topic, which was great.
She had a healthy grasp of it, and it was very like she was very sex positive, and also really talked about subjects that like you don't discuss. I mean, I didn't know that dental dams even existed until I got to college and people were talking about it.
That was an interesting topic to start with, but it's fair also that she talked about condoms and dental dams.
Yes, completely.
Yeah, and I think we were talking about like the target demographic, and I do think that like high school students would really benefit from this. But I mean, I think that like all adults would benefit from more sex ed, right?
People don't know this shit because it's just not taught, and it sucks.
Yeah.
She went into detail about how, you can still get pregnant on your period and like when you aren't ovulating and stuff. And it's like, people don't know that. She talked about how like the pull-out method is not effective. And people don't know that. She also talked about how rape victims, it's not their fault. Like she said many times, like multiple times, it's not your fault if you are sexually assaulted. Okay? It doesn't matter what you were wearing. It's not your fault. Okay? And knowing that it's not your fault can give you some level of empowerment and help deal with like, the societal shame of it,
Yeah, I'm so glad they spent so much time talking about consent. Yeah. Actually, when I was reading the first volume, I was like, okay, when are they going to talk about consent?
Yeah.
Because that's such a fundamental piece of sex ed. And I'm glad that they really went into that, because whenever people think of sex ed, it's usually like, oh, cunnilingus and dental dams. And so that's why people who are against teaching kids this kind of stuff, that's what they use. That's their idea of sex ed. And that's how they get it outlawed. And that's why I was never taught any of these things in school. And so I'm really glad that they focused on consent.
They talk about it like it's pornography, which is awful.
Yeah. And it's not all pornography. Pornography is a part of sex ed. But like when we talk about sex ed for like children should be taught consent.
Yeah.
Like sex ed is so contextual to the people that you're teaching. And I don't know why anybody would be against teaching children. Like if you don't want somebody to touch you, that's okay. You can say no. Like your agency matters. And that's how fundamental sex ed can be for children.
One of the best ways to protect children from sexual abuse is to teach them about it so that they can identify when they're being like abused, because a lot of children have no idea or no concept, and they just think that it's like they're weird for feeling bad about it almost. Like, so to be like, no, this is what is happening and it's not okay. That is very important, but people are so against it because they have this idea that if you teach a child about sex, this, then you're like destroying their innocence or some shit, and it sucks. I do also want to say, like, there were like those brief moments that were interesting where the artist was talking about how like she had to go through like this balancing act of like talking about sex and designing these characters without being horny, but like she still had to like show, you know, you're talking about horniness without actually being horny. Like she discussed how it's like, I have to draw these characters, a couple characters with like large chests, but not in like a sexual way.
Oh yeah, Nakazawa. She's like, how do I draw a character with huge tits but not make it sexual?
But it's like, it's also, that's important because you know what? Like it's a problem where like women who just naturally have large breasts are inherently sexualized, and it's like they exist. They should not have to be like forced to cover up in the same way as people who don't have boobs that big. But like, so like it was good where it's like, no, this woman just has large breasts, you know?
Yeah, again, I think the series was just very progressive.
You know, it really tried, and it did a really good job, I think.
Yeah, Jordan, I think that's a great last point. So let's get into where it could have gone, where we'll talk about some things we would have done differently. So I think we've all agreed, though, that the trans topic wasn't discussed as much. And I honestly, like, I feel like we've really talked about a lot of the things. I think that last chapter was really the only thing where I was like, oh, you really were not cooking with this. And it's just it's like hard not to feel like this series did a great job. Like, you can't really blame the characters for being two-dimensional because it's edutainment. That's not what the point of the series is.
Yeah, I mean, again, the main thing I would have done differently is like Tsuji and Nakazawa's relationship. And yeah, I would have had her just be rejected, and like you could have that's a topic that you could cover that would be important to cover, where it's like, hey, this is how to deal with rejection without getting like angry at the other person, you know, like, and respecting boundaries.
This definitely could have been used as like a lesson in sexual harassment.
Yeah.
It would have been nice if they spun it, you know, like, oh, wait, this relationship's really problematic. Here's what you shouldn't do with your coworkers.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, again, no means no, right? Like, she turned you down. You don't need your entire school peer pressuring you to say yes.
It's weird that it fell into that trap. But that is also like the only issue I think we really have with the series, other than, yeah, maybe it didn't quite go into transness as in depth as like we feel that it should have. But it's also like, I was so surprised that they went into this stuff to the level that they did, just based on the things on like my previous experience with manga.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the way you phrase it made me think of my lesbian experience with loneliness, speaking of...
That's a really good suggestion, though.
Yeah.
If this was a flop, that's what I would be suggesting. No, oh no, spoilers.
Yeah. I guess then, do we just go into miscellaneous thoughts? Because this series was really solid. Oh my goodness gracious. All right. So Sarah, while you were lettering this series, or if you had any other, are there any kind of like fun details about your time in the series you'd like to discuss?
I mean, this series just made me laugh repeatedly. Like, there's this one panel where Tsuji is like, just say no. And the text gets really big. And one of the characters has like a meta moment and they're like, oh, your font just got really big. For me as a letterer, that brings me so much joy.
I know Finn K talked about how every series usually has a few instances where it's like unusual lettering. Were there any moments where you were like, ooh, I really got to sit down and put some time into what is needed from me from a letterer perspective?
Yes, page 1. Page 1, there's a graph. Like, whenever you get assets for a new book, you don't really know what you're getting into. But, like, when I opened up this first page and I saw that graph I had to localize, oof. I was like, oh, no.
Oh, no.
Yeah, because I had to, like, retouch all of the Japanese off and then put the English back on while, like, discerning this from a script. So just, like, a Word document. Mm-hmm. You know, there isn't, like, a little, like, chart showing me where all the text goes. I have to, like, guess.
That just makes me think of like an Office Shonen series where like characters are like trying to make the best PowerPoint presentations, and they're like, I really have to nail this graph.
Plot a trillionaire game.
Really?
Kind of. It's a very good series by the writer of Dr. Stone. I think we talked about it before. But that's a really cool, interesting fact, Sarah. I never really thought about how you have to like translate graphs and stuff, but that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything that's on the page that's English is something that I put there.
Oh my God. Well, I'm really glad I really got to admire your work and talk with the letter. I feel like it's a stealth series where you don't really realize how much lettering special work has to go into it. Because it's funny, on Finn, they did Dear Anemone, and they're like, yeah, there was like 2 or 3 times where I had to do anything interesting. And that was an action series where you'd think they would be more creative with that stuff.
That was also a much less interesting series.
Yeah, that's true. I actually had a group think with MaxyBee where we were talking about how it feels like it's kind of like finding porn mags in the woods is like an SCP where they just somehow materialize.
God.
It's just, I am so glad the series covered just the random porn mags in the wild part of human sexuality, which I guess is like a universal experience even in Japan.
That was really funny how Tsuji like immediately grabs the porn mags and it's like, no, I can't let my students see these.
Yeah, let me make it so obvious.
Yeah, which kind of ties into what we were talking about. People think that sex ed is all pornography, and in that moment she was like, no, this is not sex ed. I must shield them from these harlots.
I think I might have liked them to go a little bit more into porn and like the issues with pornography.
Like, porn addiction, I think, would have been an interesting topic to discuss, especially with the BL. Like, well, I guess it's hard. I don't want to say BL is pornography, so
yeah, it's
yeah, maybe I'm on the wrong path. I was trying
but like,
yeah,
no, I mean in the sense where it's like she mentions it like I think once or twice where it's like porn is not regular sex. Like that's not what you will get wrong ideas about how sex is from porn. I would have liked them to go into a little more with that. I mean, you know, again, like sex ed and sex is such a complex topic with so many things. Like you can really only go into so many things. But yeah.
They also didn't talk about family preparedness. They always talk about preventing, but they also didn't really talk about when you know the time is right and when you actually do want to have children.
Yeah.
Which maybe they're,
yeah.
But because it's also like, I get they're 16, but it's also when else are they going to have this topic brought up to them, right?
I guess the idea there is that like having a family is already so talked about that it's like, it's more of a rare thing to be like, well, when would you not want a family? Like they already get a lot of pressure to have kids, you know?
That's true. But that's also a topic. They can talk about how do you deal with the peer pressure of it when you're not ready.
Yeah. Or even like
you know?
The age thing. Like, are you there's this idea that you're too old after. But
yeah, I think that all makes a lot of sense. And then, do you guys have anything else before I get into MaxyBee's thoughts?
Oh, one thing that I thought was really funny in the series were the pride flags.
Yeah, which are black and white.
Halftone. It made me laugh when I was working on it. It made me laugh rereading the series. It's like, yes, the lesbian flag, and it's just halftone.
Yeah, I thought they were gonna. Wasn't it a digital series, so they could have printed that in color, or they could have. Maybe it was color actually in the digital version.
I don't know. I don't know if it was color in the digital version, but it was definitely halftone in the assets that I got.
Shout out to Build King, who was a normal manga in Shonen Jump that's power system was based on colors. They show a color chart where it's different shades of gray. And it was a very, very bad series.
Oh, Build King.
I think it's funnier if it wasn't originally in color, honestly.
That's true. God. The series is funny enough that I could have seen that on purpose. There was a series where I swore the joke was on purpose, where they were doing like an art class and like, wow, I love your use of color, but Jordan thought it was just the author just didn't really think about it.
I'm pretty sure.
Do you remember what series that was that we were talking about?
It was Hentai Common.
Yeah, Hentai Common. She's like, oh, I love your use of color. And I was like, oh, that's funny. Like, Jordan was like, this series isn't funny enough. I don't think the series made that joke, because I thought that was the best joke for the entire manga.
Sarah, are you familiar with Hentai Common?
Am I familiar with hentai?
Very sex positive series. Actually, the series is very sex positive.
Sometimes I would say it is sex.
Not handled well, but it is sex positive.
Sex positive, women negative.
That's true.
Yeah.
No, I've lettered an Omegaverse title, actually.
They mentioned Omegaverse in this series.
Okay, yeah, get into that.
Holy
shit. So what is OmegaVerse?
Well, I don't read it. Actually, my first foray into Omegaverse was when I was lettering with Sublime, and the editor Jenny was like, "Oh, do you want to take up this series? It's an Omegaverse." And I'm like, "What is Omegaverse?" And so I'm Googling it, and I'm like, no.
Not really.
But then a couple years later, I got offered another Omegaverse title, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it.
Fuck it, we ball.
Omegaverse is very complicated, where it's like, shit, I don't even know if I can properly explain it. Lindsay Ellis has a really good video on it if you want to watch it.
People go check that out.
It's complicated.
Anyway, from MaxyBee, you may be asking yourself this: was this really a flop? Was this really canceled in any meaningful way? And the answer is that sometimes a top-class letter works mostly on series that perform well. And flops they've worked on have already been covered, I tell C. So we made a little bit of a fudge of our rules, Sarah, so we could have you on the show. So just know that we were so excited to have you on. We broke our own rules.
No.
Serious answer, though, a year-long run on a relatively small platform where the afterwards make it clear the production wasn't always smooth strongly suggests that an option for renewal wasn't taken, whether by editorial or by one or both of the creators. Considering the heavy research demonstrated in the biographies and the afterwards showing how often work stalled for the author, I can see that this being possible. Through in this specific case, we do not have explicit information. As MaxyBee also notes about the woods porn phenomenon, he also says it is also a factor in the UK. So truly, this may be the factor that unifies all societies. As an advantage of excellent translator notes in the back of the volume, they have nothing else to note. I want to give a shout out to the Evangelion masturbation reference.
Yeah, we forgot to mention that. There was like straight when they were talking about masturbation, they showed the panel of Shinji with like semen on his hand, and he's like, "I'm so messed up," basically.
Oh, is that what
Yeah.
that was?
It's from like end of Evangelion, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
God.
Oh my god.
If anyone reads it, this is, by the way, a very quick read with some fantastic translator notes at
Yeah.
the end. You should definitely check it out.
Really good lettering too.
Oh, lettering. Yeah, you got to read for the lettering. Sorry.
Y'all are just saying that because I'm on your podcast.
What? I thought you were the person who programmed the website we read it on. You lettered this? I had no
What?
idea.
I'm just here to talk about programming.
There we
Beep,
go.
boop, JavaScript.
How do you feel about linked lists?
I think that I've never had to ever code one outside of school.
Yeah,
so-
me neither. All right, let's get into final verdict. Woo!
Yeah.
Let's kick off our 6-word summaries from the community. Tucker, fucking, how does that work? MaxyBee, oh, better than sex education at school.
So
the
much.
Grey Potter, lesbians, perverts, sexual harassment. Oh my. Blamumu, manga can also be quite educational. Diego, Abe no longer asking, have
Abe,
sex.
Abe,
Keep us-
David.
Sorry, Abraham Lincoln is no longer asking.
Yes, there we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, Abe, sorry. Just post that meme with Abe holding a gun. Dude Rocks, extra 20% is for hijinks, and this is the future liberals want.
Unironically, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
Everyone's favorite, 120. I haven't even reached 100% completion. Gene said to love Rue without the gags.
David, that is legendary film reviewer Gene Shalit.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it is.
Monster Hunter Ichi says this is the future liberals want. Not a joke. Also not as whoops. Okay. They said that wasn't a submission. Too bad it is now. It was 6 words, so you're in. You're already on my list. Portal Man can't stop singing I'm coming out, and I can't believe it's not hentai. Spubby, what's the extra 20% for? And the laughing fool Ronald Reagan flies into a rage. I was
Good.
talking about how that man is the devil yesterday, actually.
Yeah. Ronald Wilson Reagan, 6 letters each.
Yeah, 666.
Yeah.
Sarah, well, speaking of the number 6, what was your 6-word summary?
My 6-word summary was teenage girls are horny as fuck.
Yeah.
I love it.
I feel like there's so much representation of horny girls in this. It was great. You never see that.
Yeah, I mean, as they mention, it's like talking about female sexuality is very taboo. Like, it's treated that it just doesn't exist.
Yeah, and teenage girls in particular, like, we always hear about how, like, oh, teenage boys are so horny. Like, have you met a teenage girl?
Yeah. That's one of the good things about Bob's Burgers. They get that representation in.
Yeah, even though
Yeah.
most of the women in that show are played by men.
Yes. But anyway, mine is, holy shit, a pro-LGBT manga?
And then I said, dental, damn, this was pretty educational.
Ha, 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 ha.
Eh.
Waka waka.
I feel like that was very Tucker energy in mine. I don't know why. I think he likes to say the word damn in his. Anyway, I think this was really good. This is actually our second not flop in a row, Jordan.
Yeah, this is like, I think the first time that we've had two not flops in a
this
row.
may actually be. So Sarah, very special privilege. We previously read Cyberblue, which may be the greatest terrible manga of all time.
It is at least. So we went from like one of the dumbest manga we've ever covered to one of the smartest ones, I think.
Yeah, so Cyberblue is so bad at loop back around to being the best thing. If I may, because we have a minute, I think the orphan scene still stays with me, but I don't know about you, Jordan. What would you say is the most quintessential sign of how insanely stupid Cyberblue is?
One of the characters has like borderline omnipotent powers through the power of imaginary numbers.
But there's also another power system called the Shadow Force, which may be the same power system, but it may not, and the offer never clarifies if those are the same power system.
Yes.
But speaking of the orphan, they're fighting one of the main bosses, and the sidekick of the main character gets dropped into a pit that's just randomly filled with orphans, who he then starts flooding with poison gas, and he reads a bedtime story while these orphans are dying in front of him.
But he can't read either.
And it has nothing to do with the ongoing fight. It just is just randomly what he does with the main character's sidekick.
Shout out to when that kid gets shot in the leg and it's like, oh no, the bullet is poison. You have to cut off your leg.
Oh yeah, poison bullets, and they're on the plane. And the main character gets fused with a robot called Fatso that constantly will not stop swearing.
Or how I was just telling.
Oh no, enough, Jordan. We can't keep talking about Cyber Blue. That's no. Sarah's gonna go read it. It's great. It's by the author of Fist of the North Star.
Oh, okay.
We think it's also written by because the writers do not exist. And we think he created fake writer credits.
The artist, he claimed that there were 2 writers on the series, and
one guy just named Bob.
One guy just named Bob and then some other guy, and they never did anything else. And I've never read a series that feels like it was definitely not written by more than one person.
Also the main villain is Prince.
Yes.
I forgot. That's probably a really good thing. Strong starting point to talk about how stupid that series was. Anyway, yes, I would actually unironically recommend reading that. But as we talked about, I guess we know this is good, but I think we still can take a minute to highlight some LGBT representation of manga. We've talked about my lesbian experience with loneliness. I think another one that also comes to mind is Until I Love Myself, which has a lot to do with gender identity. So that's another very LGBT manga that I would recommend.
I wish I could just sit here and list off more, but I can't really think of many other ones. It's a shame.
Sarah, can you think of any other LGBT manga that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, Boys Run the Riot. It's about a trans boy who starts his own fashion line.
Oh,
really good.
Wow.
And the entire localization staff is also queer.
That's so fun.
Which is really special.
That is really cool. Oh, I forgot to mention, my wedding actually was officiated by a gay sex ed teacher. Fun personal fact about me. Shout out to you, Al Vernacchio.
Right on.
Yeah. He actually wrote a New York Times bestselling book called, I think it's For Better Sex. But fun fact, he didn't think I was mature enough to actually be in his sex ed class. So I never actually had him as a sex ed teacher.
You know what? That's fair.
Yeah, that tracks, doesn't it? All right, let's get into it. So Jordan, though, is this the best thing we've ever read?
I think it's the most important thing we've ever read. I think it is.
Is this better than Cyberblade?
Ooh, for different.
It's
the two opposite sides of the spectrum, I feel like.
I mean, Cyber Blue is about as stupid as the characters in this series.
Cyber Blue is as stupid as this series is smart, I would say.
Or educational.
Or educational. This series, I think, will make you smarter, and Cyber Blue will just make you dumber.
Yes, but in a good way.
How do I even compare the two? I don't know.
Yeah.
All I can say is this series is more important than Cyber Blue.
You don't have to ironically read this series.
No.
All right, so let's get into wrap-ups. Ready? Support this show and get the best prices on manga at mangamart.com/shonenflop. MangaMart's a family-owned store offering 20% off manga with free shipping over $100. You can be buying this series because it's officially released. And Sarah, though, speaking of official releases, I want to say thank you so much for joining the show and lettering this awesome series. Where can people get more of your awesome content?
You can follow me on Blue Sky, and you can go to my website, sara.pizza. I make a lot of...
Sara.pizza. I love it.
Sara.pizza.
Yes, sara.pizza.
Oh, we'll have to talk about your favorite pizza place.
Do you think that the rain impacts your pizza?
Do I think that the rain impacts pizza?
This is a whole thing where David thinks that
What?
You have to go listen to the warm-up audio of a different podcast to understand the reference.
This is David's weird-ass pizza scientific theory. We'll talk, whatever. We'll tell you about it later.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's awesome. Sarah, is there a series you're currently lettering right now that you feel more people should be reading?
Yeah, I'm lettering Kamudo with Viz Media, and it's being simulpublished in Japan and the US and Canada, I think. And I'm hand lettering all of the sound effects.
Whoa.
Comes out every 2 weeks. It's fantastic. It's like a fantasy series with anthropomorphic dragon people. 10 out of 10.
Oh, that sounds sick.
Hell yeah.
How do you spell that? I'm going to go check that right
now. Kamudo, Kamudo.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to...
The artist is Akira Himekawa. So if you like the Twilight princess manga, you'll like this.
Did you see, by the way, what's his name? The guy who does a lot of the famous Final Fantasy art is doing a exhibition this week.
Oh, I didn't know that. Here in New York?
Yeah, it ends on the 15th, but the guy who did all of that super iconic watercolor art.
I love Yoshitaka.
Yeah,
oh man, I'll have to go check it out.
Yeah, so it ends this week. We can talk about it later, but yeah, I was like, fuck, my friend went to it yesterday and said it was really cool.
Also, I want to clarify that Sarah's website is, her name is sara.pizza, because
no H.
I put in the H and didn't get anything.
The H is for...
for hentai.
Yes, the H is for hentai. Sarah's the hentai comic.
Or she's not, because she doesn't have it.
Anyway, Jordan, thank you so much for all of your hard work, opening, ending, fame, and all that jazz. Jordan, yeah, that's your cue to thank me.
Oh, thank you so much, David, for all the hard work that you do on the show.
No problem, babe. Props to Merliel for the awesome cover art. You can find her online at Lyle Murr, and Nigel for being our generous art benefactor. Thank you, Dylan, for assistance with editing. You can find his podcast, Anime Out of Context, at animeoutofcontext.com. We're actually going to be on an upcoming series talking about, you'll have to find out because it may not be the one you're expecting. Thanks to Tucker and MaxyBee for assistance with pronunciation, translation, and other miscellaneous research. Thanks to Claw for being our social media manager. You can find us on Blue Sky and X at Shonen Flop, Tumblr, Shonen-Flop, and our website, shonenflop.com. We're on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, wherever else you get your podcast. If you want more weekly David and Jordan content, you can find us every Friday on the Chainsaw Minute, where we talk about the latest chapter of Chainsaw Man. Find it at csm.libsyn.com or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Join the Shonen Flop Discord. It's open to everyone, patron or not. Hang out with us and talk about anime, games, whatever else is on your mind. We have a manga book club and weekly movie nights, so it's just a ton of fun. And if you've been, and you can find a link to it in the show notes or on our site, shonenflop.com. And if you've been enjoying the podcast and want to help us keep going, subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/shonenflop. Along with that warm and fuzzy feeling of helping us out, you'll also get access to monthly bonus episodes, including the Shonen Drop, where Jordan and I look back at previous month's episode and open the mystery box. Jordan, what is inside the mystery box this in the month of March, and what is our bonus episode?
Well, David, for the month of March, we are covering the first 3 volumes of Undead Unluck with David Evelyn. And for our mystery box, well, we're reading the Fabricant 100 pilot.
Hell yeah.
Sarah, you ever read Fabricant 100?
I read the first chapter.
I will say Fabricant 100 is probably one of the strongest endings of any Shonen Jump series I've ever read. It is insanely needle threading and really brought it up a letter grade just by how well it ended.
Yeah.
So no spoilers, but it's definitely a fantastic ending. And if that's not enough, other perks include picking a manga for us to cover on a main episode, episodes up to a week in advance, and behind the scenes content like warm-up audio or recording notes. I also want to read off some of our wonderful patrons. Kicking things off with our dolphin dad, we have Rachel, my wonderful wife. She's about to go to a Disney cruise, so I hope she has a fantastic time there. Moving on down to the Ravioli tier, where you get weekly photos of my adorable goblin dog, Ravioli. I went hiking with her yesterday. Sarah, have you ever gone up to Cold Spring?
No.
Oh, it's really nice. So we went there, and Ravioli was so excited. She kept pulling me to random people because she was like, oh, I haven't said hi to this person yet, or this person throughout the hike. She kept randomly pointing me and be like, yeah, Trevor, I haven't said hi to you in like 20 minutes. She's very sweet, as Jordan can attest.
I'm so happy to hear that Ravioli had a good day.
Oh, she was so tuckered out. She just fell asleep after I took her home. We have Chris, Eva, Jeanette Davis, Justin Hefner, Matt, Scarlett, T, Tiffany, and Trevor. Moving on down to our King of the Forest, we have 090Z, Bandit Stoof,
My girlfriend.
Brad, follow AOOC on Blue Sky, Ivan, Karimon, Marty, Riley, Sarah, and Tommy Boy. And a big thank you to our Galactic Ball Federation officers and our Beast Children. And Jordan, anything you want to toss in?
Check out Mission Ignition.
I love it. All right, and then let's get into sign off. Thank you so much for joining us. Tune in next week as we talk about Raw Grad. This has been David.
This has been Jordan.
This has been Sarah.
And you've been listening to Shonen Flop.
Keep on flopping floppers.
Yeah. Bye.